My name is Ruth Blackwell, and at 73 years old, I've learned that the people who smile the brightest often cast the darkest shadows 3 months ago. I discovered that my own flesh and blood had been systematically draining my life. Savings while I grieved my husband's death. What they didn't know was that Harold had taught me more than just how to love. He'd taught me how to fight. And when they thought they'd taken everything from me, I decided to take something from them, their dreams, their future, and their ability to ever underestimate a widow again. But before I tell you exactly how I made them pay for what they did to me, I need you to understand something. This story gets darker with every revelation and more satisfying with every twist if you're someone who believes in justice for those who prey on the vulnerable. Please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you've ever been underestimated because of your age or situation, share your story in the comments below. We feature viewer stories on our channel, and your voice matters. Trust me, after you hear what my son-in-law Marcus did next, you'll have plenty to say. Now, let me take you back to Millbrook, Oregon, where this all began on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. The scent of lilies still lingered in my Victorian home on Elm Street when I first noticed something was wrong. Harold's funeral had been 3 weeks earlier, and the stream of casseroles and sympathy cards had finally slowed. I was sitting in my kitchen. The same kitchen where Harold and I had shared 47 years of morning coffee. When my daughter, Lily, arrived with her husband Marcus Chen, Lily had always been my gentle one. With her father's kind eyes and my stubborn streak buried deep beneath her soft exterior, at 45, she still sought my approval for everything from paint colors to career choices. But that morning, she seemed different, nervous, fidgety. Avoiding my gaze as she poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances," Marcus said without preamble, settling his tall, lean frame into Harold's chair at the head of my kitchen table. He was always direct. Was Marcus. It was what had attracted me to him when Lily first brought him home 15 years ago. He was a financial advisor, successful and confident, with the kind of smile that made elderly clients trust him with their retirement funds. "What about my finances?" I asked, though I noticed how his expensive suit seemed at odds with the concern in his voice. "Well, managing everything alone at your age, it's a lot of responsibility," Lily said gently, reaching across to pat my hand. "We just want to help." Marcus leaned forward, pulling out a manila folder thick with documents. "Ruth, Harold was brilliant with investments, but now that he's gone, you need someone to manage your portfolio professionally. The markets are volatile, and at your age, you can't afford to lose what Harold worked so hard to build." I studied the papers he spread across my table: power of attorney forms, investment, transfer documents, bank account authorizations. Everything looked official, professional, designed to make an old widow feel secure. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but Harold taught me more about our finances than you might think." Marcus's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course he did, but emotional decisions after a loss can be costly. Just last month, I saved Mrs. Patterson from making a devastating mistake with her late husband's 401k. What he didn't know was that Harold and I had always maintained separate investment accounts, a little secret that had served us well through decades of marriage. My personal account, the one Harold had helped me build from my inheritance and my years as a high school principal, contained nearly $800,000. It was money I'd planned to leave to Lily and her children, money that would secure their futures. But something about the urgency in Marcus's manner, the way he'd brought pre-printed forms to a casual morning visit, made my decades of experience reading people kick in. I dealt with enough manipulative parents and scheming teenagers to recognize pressure tactics when I saw them. Over the next week, I did something that surprised even me. I hired a private investigator. Jonna Torres was a former police detective who'd helped me years ago when someone broke into the school where I worked. She was thorough, discreet, and had a gift for uncovering information that people preferred to keep hidden. What Jonna discovered made my blood run cold. Marcus had been forging my signature on financial documents for over a year, systematically transferring small amounts from my checking account into an account controlled by him and Lily. They'd been careful, never taking enough to trigger bank alerts, spacing out the withdrawals to look like normal living expenses. In total, they'd already stolen nearly $50,000 of the money Harold had left me. But that wasn't the worst part. Jonna had uncovered records of conversations between Marcus and mortgage brokers, discussions about using my house as collateral for a business loan. My house, the Victorian home where Harold had carried me over the threshold as a bride, where we'd raised Lily, where every room held 47 years of memories. They're planning something bigger, Mrs. Blackwell, Jonna said as we sat in her small office downtown. The documents you refused to sign would have given them complete control of your assets. My guess is they need a significant amount of money quickly. For what? Jonna handed me a folder containing photographs and bank records. Your son-in-law has been day trading with client funds. He's lost nearly $300,000 of other people's retirement money in the past 6 months. He needs to cover those losses before his clients discover what he's done, or he'll face federal charges. I stared at the evidence spread before me, feeling the weight of betrayal settle in my chest like a stone. My own daughter, the child I'd rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose wedding dress I'd helped choose, was planning to steal my home to save her husband's career. But as I sat there in Jonna's office, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling defeated, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my early days as a principal dealing with bullies and cheats. I felt strategic. Harold always said I had a gift for seeing 3 moves ahead, for turning people's weaknesses against them. If Marcus thought he could prey on a grieving widow, he was about to learn that this particular widow had been underestimated her entire life, and she'd always made people regret it. That Friday evening, Marcus and Lily came for dinner, our usual weekly tradition. I'd made Harold's favorite pot roast, set the table with my grandmother's china, and prepared for battle. Mom, you seem so much better, Lily said, helping herself to seconds more focused. Grief is a process, I replied. I'm starting to see things more clearly. Marcus seized the opening. That's exactly what we hoped to hear. Lily and I have been talking, and we think it's time to move forward with those financial arrangements we discussed. The market's about to take a downturn. My clients are already pulling out of risky investments. Funny you should mention your clients, I said, serving myself another spoonful of green beans. Jonna Torres stopped by this week. You remember Jonna, Lily, she investigated that break-in at my school years ago. I watched Marcus's face carefully. The color drained from his cheeks so quickly I thought he might faint. Oh, what did she want? Lily asked innocently. She's been helping me understand some irregularities in my bank statements, small withdrawals, transfers I don't remember authorizing. I kept my voice conversational. Almost curious. Jonna thinks someone might be taking advantage of my grief to access my accounts. Marcus cleared his throat. That's terrible, Ruth. You should definitely look into that. Maybe we should accelerate getting your finances properly protected. Already done, I said, pulling out a manila folder of my own. I've hired Jonna to conduct a full investigation. She's very thorough. She even found records of forged signatures and unauthorized transactions. Isn't that interesting? The silence that followed was deafening. Lily looked confused, glancing between Marcus and me as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. But Marcus knew exactly what I was saying, Ruth. He said carefully, "I think there might be some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding," I interrupted, "is yours. You thought you were dealing with a grieving old woman who didn't know the difference between a checking account and a savings account. What you actually found was a former high school principal who spent 30 years catching cheaters, liars, and thieves." I opened my folder and spread photographs across the table, bank records, forged signatures, documentation of unauthorized transfers. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she recognized her husband's handwriting on documents she'd probably never seen before. "Marcus," she whispered, "what is this?" "I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand. "You can explain to the police, or you can explain to me, your choice, but understand this. I know about your client's missing money. I know about your plans for my house, and I know exactly how desperate you are." I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. "The question is, what are you willing to do to make this right?" What Marcus didn't know was that my conversation with Jeanne had given me an idea, one that Harold would have called diabolically clever, with that proud smile he used to wear when I outmaneuvered the school board. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the perfect mark. I called Marcus, tearful and apologetic, claiming that Jeanette's investigation had upset me so much I couldn't think straight. I insisted the whole thing was a mistake, that I must have forgotten authorizing those transfers. I played the confused, overwhelmed widow so convincingly that Marcus actually began calling me daily to check on my mental state. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him during one of those calls, "about needing professional help with Harold's investments. Maybe you're right." The relief in his voice was almost insulting. "Of course I'm right, Ruth. That's what family is for." "There's something I haven't told you," I continued, injecting just the right amount of hesitation into my voice. "Harold had a separate investment account that I only discovered last week. It's substantial." "How substantial?" "Nearly $1 million. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. I could practically hear him calculating how much of that money would solve his client fund problem. "Ruth, that's wonderful news, but it's also exactly why you need professional management. An account that size requires sophisticated oversight." "I agree," I said. "Could you come over tomorrow?" I found Harold's safety deposit box key, and I think all the account information is there. What I'd actually found was Harold's old briefcase, which contained documents for an account that had been closed 5 years earlier when we'd used that money to renovate the house. But Marcus didn't need to know that. What he needed was bait, and I was about to give him the most tempting bait of his life. The next morning, Marcus arrived at my house with a briefcase full of new documents. This time, the forms were even more comprehensive: complete financial power of attorney, authorization to liquidate investments, even a preliminary will that left everything to Lily for simplified estate management. I brought everything we discussed, he said, settling into his usual chair. "Once we get that safety deposit box opened and transfer the funds to a managed account, you'll never have to worry about money again." I led him to Harold's study, where I'd arranged the perfect stage for my performance. Harold's briefcase sat open on the desk, filled with official-looking documents from the closed investment account. I'd even included some of Harold's old business correspondence to make everything look authentic. Marcus's eyes widened when he saw the Morgan Stanley letterhead on the fake account statements I'd carefully prepared. This is incredible, Ruth." Harold was even more successful than I thought. "He was a remarkable man," I said wistfully. "He always said the key to building wealth was patience and the right partnerships." Absolutely. And now it's time to find you the right partnership to protect what he built. Marcus was already pulling out his phone. I'm going to call my contact at the bank. We can have this transferred and properly managed by the end of the week. That sounds wonderful, I said, but first I need to ask you something. Marcus, man to man, as Harold used to say. He looked up from his phone. Slightly confused by the sudden change in my tone, I need to know that you're the kind of man who would never take advantage of a widow's trust, that you would never forge signatures or steal from someone who considered you family. I watched his face carefully. Because Harold always said that trust was the foundation of every good financial partnership. Marcus's smile never wavered. But I saw his hand tighten around his phone. Of course, Ruth, you can trust me completely. I'm so glad to hear that, I said, because tomorrow we're going to the bank together. And you're going to help me transfer every penny of that $1 million into your management. The greed in his eyes was unmistakable. He thought he'd won. He had no idea the game was just beginning. The next morning, as we prepared to leave for the bank, Lily arrived unexpectedly. She looked tired, stressed in a way I hadn't seen since her college finals. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, glancing nervously at Marcus, alone. Marcus immediately protested. "Lily, we're already running late for the bank appointment. 5 minutes," she insisted. Once Marcus stepped outside, Lily sank into the kitchen chair and began to cry. "Mom, I know what Marcus has been doing." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "The money, the transfers. I found the bank records." She looked up at me with Harold's eyes, red-rimmed and desperate. "I didn't know, Mom, I swear on Dad's grave. I didn't know he was stealing from you." For a moment, I felt something crack. Inside my chest, my daughter, my sweet, trusting daughter, wasn't part of the conspiracy. She was another victim. "How long have you known?" I asked gently. "I found the records 3 days ago when I was looking for our tax documents. When I confronted him, he said," she took a shuddering breath, "he said he was protecting us. That you were getting confused and might make bad financial decisions. He said he was going to pay it all back once his investments recovered, and you believed him." I wanted to, God help me. I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was, she gestured helplessly, the alternative was admitting that I married a man who would steal from my widowed mother. I sat down beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Lily, honey, it's worse than you know." I told her about Jeanette's investigation, about Marcus's client funds, about the extent of his desperation. With each revelation, I watched my daughter's face transform from grief to horror to something harder. Something that reminded me of myself at her age, when I'd first learned that the world could be crueler than I'd imagined. "What are we going to do?" She whispered. "We're going to the bank," I said, "and we're going to finish this." "But Mom, if there really is $1 million, there isn't," I said gently. "That account was closed years ago. Your father and I used that money to renovate the house. I've been setting a trap." Lily stared at me in amazement. "You've been, what, playing the long game, sweetheart, the way your father taught me." I stood up and smoothed my skirt. "The question is, are you with me?" Outside, Marcus was pacing on my front porch, checking his watch. He thought he was minutes away from solving all his problems. Instead, he was about to learn that underestimating Ruth Blackwell was the biggest mistake of his life. The First National Bank of Millbrook was busy that Tuesday morning, but Lamar Peterson, the branch manager, had cleared his schedule for what Marcus had described as a significant asset transfer. We sat in his private office, Marcus confident and eager, Lily pale but determined, and me playing the role of confused widow one last time. "Now, Mrs. Blackwell, Mr. Peterson said kindly, Mr. Chen has explained that you're looking to transfer a substantial investment account into professional management. Do you have the account numbers and authorization documents?" I fumbled in my purse. pulling out Harold's old briefcase key. It's all in the safety deposit box Harold left me. Marcus has been so helpful in explaining how to handle everything. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. The account is with Morgan Stanley. Nearly $2 million in diversified investments. Ruth wants to consolidate everything for easier management. Mr. Peterson nodded. Very wise. Would you like to access your safety deposit box now? Actually, I said, before we do that, I have something I need to discuss with Marcus. I opened my purse and pulled out a different folder, one containing photocopies of every forged check. Every unauthorized transfer, every piece of evidence Jonna had collected over the past month. Marcus, I need you to explain these to Mr. Peterson. The color drained from Marcus's face as he recognized the documents. Peterson adjusted his glasses, studying the bank records with growing concern. These appear to be unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Blackwell's accounts. Mr. Peterson said slowly, they are. I confirmed nearly $50,000. Stolen over the course of a year by the man sitting next to me, Mom, Lily started. But I held up my hand. There's more, Mr. Peterson. Marcus has been embezzling from his investment clients. He needs money to cover his losses before they discover what he's done. That's why he's been so eager to get control of my assets. Marcus finally found his voice. Ruth. This is a misunderstanding. Is it a misunderstanding that you forged my signature on these documents? I pulled out another sheet, or that you've been planning to use my house as collateral for your debts. Mr. Peterson was already reaching for his phone. Mrs. Blackwell. I think we should contact the authorities. Wait, I said, before we involve the police. I want to give Marcus a choice, the same choice I gave him at my dinner table 2 weeks ago. I pulled out one final document. A promissory note I'd had Jeanette's lawyer friend prepare. You can sign this agreement to repay every cent you've stolen, plus interest, within 90 days. You can also resign from your firm and agree to never work in financial services again. Do that. And I won't press charges. And if I don't? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Then Peterson calls the police. I provide all this evidence to the district attorney. And you explain to your clients how their retirement funds ended up in your day trading account. I leaned back. In my chair, your choice, Marcus, prison or bankruptcy. But either way, you'll never steal from another widow. The silence in that office stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Marcus reached for a pen. Where do I sign? 3 months later, Lily and I sat on my front porch, watching her 8-year-old son Tommy play in the sprinkler on my front lawn. The divorce papers had been finalized the week before. And while Lily was still healing from the betrayal, she was stronger than I'd ever seen her. Mom, she said, sipping the iced tea I'd made, I need to ask you something. What's that? Was there ever really $2 million? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt since Harold's death. No, sweetheart, but there was something more valuable. What's that? The knowledge that I raised a daughter who would choose what's right over what's convenient. Even when it cost her everything. Lily was quiet for a moment, watching Tommy chase the sprinkler's arc across the grass. I kept thinking about what Dad would say. About what kind of person stands by while someone hurts their family. Your father would be proud of you, I said, and he'd be laughing about Marcus right now. Why? Because Marcus spent months thinking he was outsmarting a silly old widow. He never realized that this silly old widow had been handling bullies and con artists for 30 years before he was born. Lily laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from her since everything began. So what happens now? Now we rebuild, I said. Marcus will spend the next few years paying back what he stole, working at his brother's construction company. His clients got their money back from his firm's insurance bond. And we learned something valuable about the difference between family and blood relatives. Was the difference. Family protects you. Blood relatives are just people who happen to share your DNA. That evening, after Lily and Tommy had gone home, I called Jonna Torres to thank her again for her help. You know. Mrs. Blackwell, Jonna said, I've been thinking about your case. Have you ever considered that there might be other elderly people in Millbrook dealing with similar situations? What do you mean? I mean, maybe this shouldn't be the end of your story. Maybe it should be the beginning. As I hung up the phone, I realized Jonna was right. Marcus had targeted me because I seemed vulnerable, alone, an easy mark. How many other widows and widowers in our small town were facing similar predators? Harold always said that the best revenge was living well, but sometimes living well meant making sure the same thing didn't happen to someone else. I opened my laptop, the same laptop where I'd researched investment fraud and forged signatures, and began typing a new kind of document, a letter to the editor of the Millbrook Gazette explaining how to recognize financial elder abuse and what resources were available for victims. At 73, I was done being underestimated. But more importantly, I was done letting other people be victimized by those who saw age as weakness instead of wisdom. Marcus had taken my savings, but in the end, I'd taken something much more valuable from him, his ability to ever hurt another family the way he'd hurt mine. And as I sat in Harold's study, typing by the light of his old desk lamp, I realized something that made me smile. Harold had taught me about investments, about building wealth, about protecting what we'd worked for, but the most valuable thing he'd given me wasn't money at all. It was the knowledge that sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to make sure their wisdom lives on in the battles you choose to fight. The war against Marcus was over, but the fight to protect other families like mine, that was just beginning. If you've ever faced financial abuse or elder fraud, please share your story in the comments below. Your experience could help protect someone else's family. And we feature viewer stories on our channel. Remember, age is not weakness, it's wisdom, and wisdom, when properly applied, is the most powerful weapon of all.